Joining us this morning, Titania Jordan.
Tatiana Jordan. Did I get the name right? Jordan?
Titania.
Titania. Okay. All right.
It's Titania Jordan. Welcome everybody to Connect. Today I'm here with Trevor Williams, managing editor of Global Atlanta.
Yes.
And we were just talking off camera or on camera. You might be seeing what we were talking about or not. I'm not sure. It depends on how it's edited. But we have so many connections, and that speaks to Atlanta, just our city. And yeah, it's a top 10 market, but it's truly a small town when it comes down to it. So, how did you get started with Global Atlanta?
I looked at a Career Center job posting 10 years ago at the University of Georgia, where I was studying journalism.
Okay.
And I had no clue what I was going to do with my life. I knew that I enjoyed international affairs. I was studying Chinese at the time, in part because I'd already started traveling there and knew that I wanted to connect with people on my subsequent trips. And so I studied Chinese, also studied religion along with my journalism degree. So very interested in how people think, what they believe. And my boss thought that would be a good quality to have in someone who's going to be interacting with other cultures on a regular basis.
That's amazing. So I went to UGA, dated a guy named Mark Thompson who also studied Chinese. I don't know if you know him.
No, I don't think so.
That's okay. He's really cool. He went on to become a lawyer in China.
Okay.
Now I think he's back in DC. But that kind of blew my mind. Spending time with him while he was studying Chinese is not easy.
No,
You've got to be a special kind of smart person to study that language.
I think it's more about effort than intelligence. I mean, I think there's definitely a propensity or an ability that comes along with it, maybe somewhat tied to musical ability with languages, I think, especially with tonal languages like Chinese. But I think the main thing is you got to love it because it's going to be a lifelong pursuit, whatever you do. And I think the way that I got started kind of backing into it made it better for me because I wasn't trying to learn it for commercial purpose. I wasn't trying to do it because I thought it was going to be the language of the 21st century or something like that. I was doing it because I had met people and I wanted to talk to them. I mean, it was just that simple. And so I didn't speak any language fluently and still wouldn't say I'm fluent in any other language other than Southern English. But it was not, like I said, it wasn't a strategic endeavor. It was more of a heart thing.
Yeah.
And that was what kept me interested and still keeps me interested. I don't use it as much as I should, but I'm going back to China next month and I'll be using it while I'm booking train tickets and meeting with people there. So
that's awesome. That's really, really cool. I studied Latin in school, a little bit of French, and I wish I would have studied Spanish, obviously. Really, really good to know that.
Yeah,
and then also German. I married a German native. We were talking about how, my father-in-law is Dr. Ike Jordan, who was instrumental in some of the early international business efforts in the city. Man, it'd be so cool to know that language. So one day.
Yeah,
put it on
I
the
mean,
list.
you miss so much when you don't. Even if you consider that most Germans who are doing international business can speak English, there's still cultural things that you miss, and there's still opportunities for advancement, I think, that you miss if you don't have that language. I was just actually on a panel at the Goethe Zentrum speaking about foreign languages in media.
Wow.
And I didn't have any fluency to speak of, really, but I was able to tell a lot of disparate stories about how either knowing some of the language or not knowing a language really affected my ability to do my work. And it was fascinating to hear from other people on that panel as well. But German is one that's, I think, growing in popularity in Georgia because of the high levels of investment we have from German companies here.
Yeah, so we're thrilled about that. So for those of you watching who don't know, and you should know, Global Atlanta covers international business from a local perspective. Is that right?
That's fair to say.
Okay. Talk more about Global Atlanta, though.
Yeah. So it's international business, education, culture, diplomacy, trade, anything that can be tied back to how Atlanta sees itself in the world, how Atlanta is connected with the global economy. So the foundation is business, but we don't just limit it to that. And the foundational geography is Atlanta, but we really see ourselves as a Georgia and a Southern publication as well. in part because we cover the activities of the local diplomatic corps, and they generally have territories that are spread farther throughout the South. And there are a lot of industry sectors that really don't stop at state borders. And so we try to at least keep up to date on what's happening in the competing states, I guess, outside the Georgia borders. But Global Atlanta's been around for 20 plus years. Started as a fax news service, if you can believe that. I don't really know what that is. But, my boss tells me it was this machine that sent things out through phone lines.
It's so
and what was amazing about it at the time was really, it was an innovation on multiple fronts. So for one, it was an innovation in the delivery of the news, for better or for worse, which we could also say for the internet nowadays. And it was also innovation in the mindset of how you approach news, because this was the era where you had foreign correspondents who were reporting back. Now you don't have as many of those anymore. A lot of publications have cut their foreign budgets. But it was this mindset that sprung up really out of my publisher Phil Bolton's personal experience and then what he saw happening in Atlanta and the world at the time. So he had been a journalist in France for 2 years, reporting on banking. He spoke fluent French and had grown up. Some of his earlier childhood years were in France. And so, but that was the culmination of his earlier journalistic career, which had been in local news, on the Macon Telegraph, where he worked in Middle Georgia. And so he saw the intersection between these two things, and he really had this idea that if you point to two places on a map, you'll find some connection eventually between those two places. And so when he returned to Atlanta, I think it was in 90 or 91, the Olympics were on the horizon, and he really was trying to figure out what to do for his next endeavor. And he just thought, man, this is a time where Atlanta is figuring out that it can make its voice heard in the world. And I've just been overseas, I know local news, what do I do? And so he started this publication. And I think at the time there was this idea that he could cover everything. In Atlanta, there was a lot of focus on the breakup of the Soviet Union and those kinds of things, but really the international business sector is unrecognizable from what it is today in the way that it's grown. I mean, there was Coca-Cola and there were some of the big companies, but there wasn't this proliferation of organizations around the city that were really trying to promote it on a global scale. And so he used to talk about going to pretty much every single international meeting, and that blossomed into Global Atlanta being kind of a gathering place for the community on multiple fronts, from content to events, and that's kind of still the core of what we do today, but it's changed in the way we deliver it.
How are local Atlanta companies engaging with the global economy? You have unique insight into that, so share with our viewers who might not know. Yeah.
So that was what I was going to talk about a little bit. We were working with the Metro Atlanta Chamber and some other partners on this export special report that we've been doing.
Wow.
This is our third year doing it, and the events this week where we're bringing together a lot of different exporters to talk about what they're doing. So it really depends on the sector. I mean, the big Fortune 500s that are here in Atlanta are inherently global, but and I think have a lot of insights that the smaller companies won't. But I think the smaller companies, like I said, are finding ways to engage. I'm writing about right now, like before I came, I was writing about a little company that does helicopter parts.
Wow.
And they're shipping helicopter parts to South Africa and China and other places. And so I think it depends on the sector, obviously. This export event is going to focus on highlighting those kinds of stories, though. There's one I just wrote about that's doing air pollution control technologies and selling those to Chile and Peru and
that's awesome.
Places where there are mining operations or power plants. I mean, so really what's fascinating to me is that the more you look, the more you find. I mean, and it really is hard to just pinpoint one thing.
Is that why I have 17 browser tabs open right now on my laptop?
It's
just a rabbit hole.
My wife is like, how do you even read that stuff,
Like we were talking about, again, off camera, this thing right here, thank you for my ADD. So there we are.
But yeah, so I mean, they're engaging in different ways. I think, so the export side is this awakening that, hey, if we're proactive, there's opportunity. But at the same time, export numbers in Georgia in particular, but nationally as well, have been declining over the last few years. So they run up against the realities as well. So there's some cultural hurdles to doing business. I mean, it's complete. If you go to Saudi Arabia, as one company did that I'm working on a story about, there are going to be completely different cultural considerations than if you're selling in Alabama. So
yes,
so
yes,
and there's segregation of sexes that you have to deal with. There's all these little things that you learn. But I think the one thing that I've heard from everybody is that it's, as long as you don't lose your shirt, it's pretty rewarding. And you start to understand the shared humanity, and you start to build international friendships and that kind of thing, and it makes your life more interesting. That's kind of what's kept me interested.
It's richer. It's rewarding.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to say about Atlanta in particular is that the way technology is growing, you have this emergence of companies that are now global from inception, which is a pretty new thing, I think. Even with the internet having been around as long as it has, I don't think you've had this kind of consciousness that, hey, I can be an international company and be 2 or 3 people, And whether that's helicopter parts or it's fintech, it can be really the same thing as long as you shift that mindset early on.
Yeah, we did a show on the Techstars class this year, and one of the startups was Farm Crowdy.
Yeah, they came to one of our events recently.
I love what they're doing, and the fact that anybody can contribute and make an impact. I've never set foot on the continent of Africa, yet I can now contribute to a farmer's well-being, empower women to provide for their families. It's freaking awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, so I'm anyway.
But we just had this is kind of an interesting connection to what we do. So we just had an event. One series we've launched is called Consular Conversations. So we take the locally based diplomats who are usually here for 3 to 4 years, and we put them in front of an audience like this, and we ask them questions, just like we're doing right now.
So cool.
And generally the audience is 50 to 60 people, business people that are involved in education and other sectors. And it becomes a way for them to get their kind of public diplomacy message out there. And also, so we followed up with an article and all that. But I think with the Nigerian Consul General we did last week, or last month, Farm Crowdy, who's here on the Techstars program, is able to attend and learn about what's happening in their home country from a diplomat that's based here in Atlanta. So, bringing that full circle, and to illustrate the point even further, the way I got in touch with Farm Crowdy was just to tweet at them, and their team back in Lagos, Nigeria, emailed their CEO who came to our event in Midtown Atlanta. So, there's all kinds of opportunities like this, and we're trying to prepare ourselves internally for that, make our own technological changes, but also just recognize that, this is part of connecting the dots.
Well, I think the reason why I love Atlanta so much is because we are a true community here. No matter how big the city gets, we're not too big for our britches, to use a Southern colloquialism. We really do care about each other, and we want to foster relationships and foster growth and see each other succeed, which is, it's a really great place for fostering international commerce.
I think it's pretty unique in that regard too.
Yeah.
Sometimes I cover so many economic development events that I drink the Kool-Aid a little bit, but I think it is true. I hear it enough from impartial third-party sources that, hey, I've not been to other cities that really care this much. Like, why do y'all care so much about whether my 2-person company lands here or not? Of course the ulterior motive is that you grow and you create jobs here, but there's an understanding of a shared benefit.
Yeah, I think
there's one tech company that I've written about recently, as I'm writing more about technology as an export, called Volantio. I'm not sure if you've connected with them, but they do software for airlines, basically enabling you to resell your seat back to the airline so that they can sell it to a higher paying customer.
That's cool.
So yeah, their founder had been in Atlanta for a while, but when he was coming back from Australia, he was asking, where should I set my company up? And when he went to California, he just didn't feel welcome,
Yeah.
And it was almost, he phrased it as, it was almost like we should be grateful to be there, not the other way around, And he said he found it completely opposite here. And I think, Global Atlanta For Better for Worse has been part of that in a way by connecting those dots.
Yes.
We're helping kind of foster that environment,
Yeah,
especially on
so
the international side.
when we ask how y'all doing, we mean it.
Yeah.
We want to know the answer. We're not just
Yeah.
making conversation. And on that note, what can we as a community, both local and global, do for you and do for Global Atlanta? How can we help you? What are you trying to achieve, in the next few years, and how can we help?
I think it's just really engage. Figure out which aspect of our website and our personalities or whatever appeals to you and can help you. We find that really our main problem is awareness.
Okay, well we're fixing that today.
Yes, yeah, hopefully so. And that when people discover us, a lot of times it's people that are moving into Atlanta from overseas, and they're like they want to continue this ethos of internationalism that they've had while living overseas, and they find out that despite the fact that sometimes you have to sit in traffic to get there, there's a lot of things going on. There's one aspect of Atlanta that's helpful to us but discouraging for some people is that it's not always cohesive in terms of the way communities interact with each other. There's an intentionality you have to have in order to engage, and we see ourselves as helping facilitate that. And I think there's a variety of ways to do it. I'm a journalist, so I love when you read the articles and take action based on those articles. And I think that that's been a foundational tenet of what we've done for a long time. And before, in the early 90s, the article was, hey, there's a delegation from China coming here. And Phil would put the Beijing phone number in there as a joke, who's going to call the delegation after they come. And now that you can get on WeChat or get on Skype or whatever and talk to people. And so now the delegation being here is not a story for Atlanta anymore. That's not what we're really, we still use our calendar to kind of provide that information, but the stories are more about the deeper connections and the trends and the analysis of what's happening rather than there are people here, because that's happening so much with the way the city's grown. So I think there are different ways you can use us. You can come to in-person events.
Yep.
That's something we're just getting into now. That's been an interesting endeavor. It's a different skill set to plan an event than to write an article.
Yes.
But at the same time, a lot of the aspects of it are the same. You're organizing content pretty much. And so we feel that we're pretty good at that, and we understand what everybody else is doing too, so we can both avoid direct competition with a lot of people that are supporting us, but also bring up things that aren't being brought up or do things that aren't being done. So I definitely say engage with the events that we're doing and also with the people that we're promoting. I think if you go to our website and you look at the events page, you could plan if you're an internationally oriented person, you could plan your calendar for a few months.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So we will
there's
have
different layers to it depending on what you need. Some people just read it because they want to see that next German company that's setting up a factory in Georgia because they want to sell them accounting services or something. And so, we're trying to be, as a media outlet, being horizontally oriented is not always the easiest. It's a little bit easier to make money sometimes if you're Carpet Monthly or something, where you're an industry read, that everybody has to have to do business. Not necessarily always that interesting. Our lives are very interesting, but we have to find ways to create a vertical within this broader thing, because when people ask you who your readership is and you tell them, well, it's some economic development people, some accounting people, some manufacturers, it's not really a cohesive marketing story to an advertiser sometimes. So we're creating these verticals. So there's the events, there are specialized content that you can get. When you sign up for our newsletters, you can get a China newsletter every month. You can get a Canada newsletter. You can get Germany.
Super targeted.
Yeah, you can get diplomacy if you just want to hear about all the diplomats that are coming through, which a lot of the diplomats read about the diplomats. We're trying to be as service-oriented as we can, and that's where technology has really helped us.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Trevor Williams, Global Atlanta, thank you for being here. Thank you for giving us an inside look to what you do and why you do it.
Yep.
And we'll have the link below in the description on YouTube when you're watching. You can click there and learn more and follow along. So
Great.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.